Hello, welcome. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. Welcome back to another webinar that I'm going to be doing. We have talked often about what we can become in anything we do, and that is true. And we know that. We know that from the science that's not the science that's coming out, but the science that's always been. Science that you've been not allowed to understand, not the science that has not been taught in our traditional schools. And the science that's not taught in our traditional schools has kept you away from the being we know you could become. Now, I've been doing martial arts for over 35 plus years. And what I always believe is that martial arts and education and science has always been put together. We've been putting together since the Qing dynasty of the old age, and we know that the yoga practices helps bring our breath into our life, and life is about energy. I'm not going to get into that more now because I've done that before, and if you have any questions, you can always contact me at dakotadragondefense@gmail.com. Or you can always visit my website, dakotadragondefense.com, and contact me through there. But what I wanted to show to you today, I think I was talking to someone recently about the world. She said, the world is in a bad place. The world isn't in a bad place. We just didn't know the place that we are in. And that's important when you don't understand the place that you're in. You can have a lot of hardships, a lot of joy, and all those things are the circulation of life, and we know that. But I want to specifically talk about what emotional intelligence is and how we can develop that emotional intelligence through our training. Martial arts training, most people have always been misunderstood between that it was about a physical practice. No, martial arts life and a martial artist and the martial sciences has always been about the complete circle of life. And it comes from the three levels of life between our mental and our spiritual and our physical self. Okay. So if you hear, I have the brain up. You've seen the brain before, and you've even heard about the different influences of the brain. We know about the here between the different the frontal, um, the the prefrontal, the amygdala, and how it influences in our life. But when we do our training in martial sciences, we focus on our brains through the action of the physical. And then when we break it down, we work on our mental and our emotional self so we can enhance our physical self. Now, it'll take too long for us to go and understand what each part of the brain is. Okay. Now, this little part here that I want to touch on, and I've touched on it before, and it's the amygdala. It's right here. It is the oldest part of our brain. And in the part of being the oldest part of our brain, it has that one thing we know. It is the fright, flight, fight response. It's one of those old survival parts of our brain. As we are doing our techniques, and as we are working on our different katas and a different physical thing, we are making sure that we are retraining what the amygdala can do for us. Now, the pituitary gland, as you see here, is called the master gland. It sets off different chemical reactions into what we are thinking, and because of the different chemicals it releases. Okay, let's go down here. The septum. You see how it influences anger and fear. Right down in here. A lot of your receptors and a lot of the way you have been defined information according to what you have seen through emotions, through environment, through previous education, and through the different blocks that people have given you, you have never really focused on how you can change this. In the martial sciences, we hit this part of the body and the brain. When you're working on a defensive mechanism, I mean, when you say self-defense, we're talking about defense against sickness. We're talking about defense against sickness of health, sickness of emotions, and sickness of, of, of your whole life. When we are, and then you have the hippocampus. This is the learning and the memory. This is, as you see here, it says the learning and the memory. The hippocampus is what can absorb. Training takes time. I understand you have to go to work every day. I understand that you have families and kids, and I understand that we have kids that have been sick, we have people that have passed on, and we have different things influencing us. That's why when we talk about our training, what are you training? What are you focusing on in your training helps you to defend against those outside sicknesses that you never had a chance to defeat or allow in. We can get into how you allow different sicknesses into your body, and that is caused through the different breath actions and the different physical actions you can do to protect your inner body. Over here, the hypothalamus, temperature, eating, sleeping, endocrine system. Now, again, I'm not going to go through the science of the brain, and I want you to do your own little physical study because that helps you with your own education. But if you can control your temperature and how your body reacts to the different chemical resistance that's coming from the outside, and this comes from our breath. This comes from the practice that we do. That's why I have all my students write about how it feels to them when they're doing their practice, how it feels to when they're practicing their physical self, because it's part of your emotional self. If you don't know where your emotions are coming from, more likely they're dictating to where you're going to. And again, down here is called the midbrain. The midbrain, you can see how it activates this, and it carries messages from the sleep and arousal. A lot of things, if Freud was right, and I believe in some of the things that he has said, is that a lot of our things come from what are we getting out of it, and that is our arousal. We're actually feeding something in our body that is asking for us to continue to do it, i.e. like if I have a sugar craving inside my body, I'm going to go and seek out sugar. And then you hear the pons. And all this is triggered all the way through our brain. So when we are thinking, we're breathing, we are opening up our center head to receive the things from the universal knowledge. As it comes down through the body and through our brainstem, it connects into our central highway that we know as the spine. Once that spine gets activated and all of our nerves starts to feel all what we've been thinking, then we can direct our energy and our power forward. The different practices, let me bring this up here. I'm going to bring this page up here too. So you see that you have the prefrontal lobe, the occipital lobe, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. The brainstem is what the central highway, how it comes down into our body. Again, I'm not going to go over to all what it does, but I want you to understand that in our martial science practices, we are affecting our lives from the inside out. We are connecting you with yourself. We are connecting you with the balance of yourself, the balance of your spirituality, the balance of your physical, and the balance of your emotional self. Emotional intelligence has not been taught to you. It has not been shown to you that the things that you are doing, it is causing affliction inside your body. It is causing the physical self to respond to the emotional discomfort or dis-ease. You've heard that before. In martial sciences, we practice the emotional intelligence. I really believe this should be brought into schools, and it should be taught way before we learn history. If you are learned about your emotional intelligent self, you can understand how your different parts of your life will affect your feelings about it. Here's another quick slide that I thought was pretty good, and it has here with the brain functions, or the functions of what in your prefrontal, the occipital, and you see how emotions is up here pretty close to that prefrontal, and then you have liver, and then you have lung, you have speech, you have motion. That's why when we do our physical motion, you can see right around here is where the amygdala is in a center part of here. And you have memory, and you have, so all the things you're feeling, acting, doing, and presenting starts up here in your emotional intelligence of yourself. Why we emphasize in all of our energy practices, energy meaning life. And I don't want to use a lot of holistic words, because sometimes people get thrown off by energy and power. And now we're starting to hear it in our mainstreams, and that's okay, that's fine. But I think it gets a lot of misrepresentative to what it actually is or means. So let's just go with our lungs, right? And our lungs, we know, is from our breath. And if we can influence just in our lungs in itself, and we come back out here and see this picture, you can see it's right there in our prefrontal lobe. And it's right. Lungs, prefrontal lobe. See how it overlaps there? See how it overlaps there, right in our lung area. So we have the prefrontal lobe, and in that prefrontal lobe, we have, let's go back to this other slide again. Oh, shoot. Right here is where that lung is, right? And that's where our prefrontal lobe is, and that's where our cerebral cortex is giving. And you can see how it is between the two hemispheres. It changes in here, so it allows you to regulate between the two. Thinking, sensing, functioning, and voluntary movements. This is why we do the practice on the physical side of it. Please take the time to, when you're in your studies, practice, understand, and learn what it is and how it's affecting you. It starts from the brain, works our way through the body into our internal self, or we can work our internal self out into our brain so we can clear it up. Thank you for taking this time. I understand that life is difficult. Life can be sad, but it doesn't have to defeat you. That's why we practice the martial science. And in the martial science, we teach the emotional intelligence, we teach the confidence of self, and we teach you how to understand what you are, when you are, where you are at every given breath. Because in your breath, there's life. In your breath, there's understanding. In your physical self, there's a balance between your spiritual, your mental, and your physical. Thank you for taking this time out. I hope this helps just a little bit, that carries you on in the things you do. Find yourself a good teacher. Find yourself a person that will teach you about yourself. And you can defend yourself against any sickness out there. Namaste.